Hi, I'm Sandy Lowries, and today on the Good Girl Confessional podcast, I'm so happy to be chatting with Lisa Westgate. Lisa is a writer, a keynote speaker, a coach and a trainer, and is also an advocate for mental health. After a decade as a paramedic, Lisa found herself angry all the time, exhausted, and hitting the roof at the slightest sound. It took 2 years for her to be given a diagnosis of PTSD. After some time wallowing on the couch, Lisa realised that wasn't the life that she wanted as a 34-year-old with a young family. Lisa is now symptom-free and medication-free. That was 2015. Since then, Lisa has spent her time learning, speaking, educating and advocating for complementary mental health pathways, working with individuals to heal their trauma, and volunteering time and expertise at organisations such as the Victoria Police. Lisa is an incredible writer, and I'm really pleased to say that she has written an incredible article for us on the very first edition of Women Beyond 40 magazine also, which is now available. I'm so pleased to be talking to Lisa Westgate today. Welcome, Lisa. So hello and welcome, Lisa Westgate. Welcome to the Confessional.
Thank you. It feels very serious when you say that. Like, all right, the confessional, we're gonna no holds barred.
Like I mean business apparently when I say that, but no, not really. As you know, well, we joke and call it the confessional. The Good Girl Confessional is, of course, just a tongue-in-cheek reminder of the societal pressures that they put on women and how we're meant to be good and quiet. And I'm clearly not that.
Yeah, that's good that there's irony in that title, because I definitely fail in that department.
As we all do. So first of all, I wanted to say a big congratulations to you, because you recently won a bronze award at the Raw Success Awards for your work and advocacy in the mental health sector. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's up on my bookshelf, out of the box, which, you know,
Woo!
actually put it up. Yeah, it was I didn't really think I was an awards person until I won one. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this is cool. I want more of these. So yeah, it was actually really special. You were there, so you know.
I was there.
And it was the first award handed out at the event, which was very exciting. I was so relieved, actually, that I was like, good, it's done now. I don't have to sit there freaking out. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like I think I sort of played it down in my head how much it meant, and maybe that resonates with you too. So I was like, you know, either way, you know, I don't do it for the awards, and I don't, but it feels good. You know, it's sort of like it's just nice to be recognized, not just for the work we've done in 2020, but, you know, in my case, I think it's sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years leading up to it as well. So it really did feel like a culmination of all of that time and going, okay, this is worth it. I'm going to keep going, because, you know, some days it's really hard. So I just look up there and I'm like, all right, well, people need what I'm doing, so I'll keep at it.
And they do. And, you know, that's a really interesting thing as well, because you were saying not just the work that we've done in, say, 2020, but 2020 has been, let's face it, one hell of an epic year in so many ways that, you know, that businesses and small businesses and especially kind of in the field that you work in, which is, you know, you're a mental health expert. So to work in that field, 2020 was kind of, you know, the apocalypse of all of that, right?
Yeah, definitely had that feel about it. And I was talking to the CEO of a mental health organization that I'm affiliated with, Fearless, based out of Canberra. They're amazing, Canberra, I think. And they do awareness and stuff around PTSD. And we were talking about this whole COVID thing, this is a few months ago. And my impression of it is that it really created a pressure cooker situation globally. So things that were kind of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, we're coping with it as it is. It's not that bad. Those sorts of things had that added strain of everything to do with COVID. So sickness and isolation and difficulty moving, and you can't come to the office, and whether it's an individual or a business or a government organization or the government themselves, it really, that extra pressure just revealed the cracks, and those cracks opened up, and it was like, oh, do you know what? The security industry in Melbourne doesn't really function very well. Hey, we probably wouldn't have found that out had it not been for COVID, or, until something of similar scope. Turns out the state government doesn't really know how to run a quarantine program, and they sort of did that, by the seat of their pants, But so, and then in your organization, you're like, oh shit, all of my systems are designed around going to a place because I run an events company, or, so there was all these. It was an opportunity to really highlight the things that you probably wouldn't have known were an issue until much later down the line, and it exposed all of those, but all at the same time. So individually, organizationally, business and government all went, oh yeah, no, none of those things work properly. Centrelink and tax, everything on multiple levels just sort of fell apart. And I think that's that apocalyptic kind of feel, is like it all felt like it all exploded in a reasonably short time frame.
And I guess that's the big thing too, is like how quickly it all happened, right? And as such is the way with a pandemic, but how quickly it all happened. And I suppose, in Melbourne, we saw it so quickly. Here in Australia, we were shut down very, very quickly. And we kind of all, while there was this initial Australian feeling of, oh, we're all in this together, it suddenly really became about Victoria, as opposed to the rest of Australia. But what that did in some ways was collectively bring us together. And in other ways kind of divided after a while, because, for those overseas listening to this, we did shut down twice, an extreme shutdown, and then got to 0 cases, which is kind of extraordinary when we look at the numbers overseas. But now what we're looking at is, say, New South Wales, there are huge clusters going on, and we realize, it only takes one person to have it for it to spread quite rapidly. And so, this kind of feeling of, oh, it's just Victoria, is now suddenly yet again, oh, hang on, this is a bit of an Australian issue. It's not just a one state issue.
Yeah, I think from a mental health perspective, in terms of the cracks that were exposed in the mental health system, part of that is that a lot of crisis support and a lot of even, specific trauma-based organizations and support services are generally directed towards a very short-term traumatic event. So we can help you recover from a sexual assault or a car accident or, a physical attack, or, it's a thing that happens sort of in a moment or over a really super short time frame. And what has been required to adapt to is supporting people through essentially a trauma, an event that has gone on for, towards 12 months. And the systems aren't really set up for that, and I think that's been part of the challenge with the existing mental health framework, is that they're not really set up for a long-term ongoing response of, or I've been out of work now, or I've been isolated in my house.
One of the things you were saying that, a lot of cracks started to form in mental health services because they weren't really set up for this long-term thing. And I guess it's important to remember, say, in Australia, that we'd already gone through, not me personally, but a lot of people had gone through the trauma of sort of extraordinary bushfires that came through this country. So that happened, and bam, on the tail end of that, the pandemic hit.
Yeah, we really haven't as a nation been able to take a breath since sort of September 2019, because it just really ran onto each other. And lots of people last Christmas, as you were saying, were heavily impacted in that they really didn't get a break. And I know somebody who was heavily impacted by the fires. They kept their house, fortunately, but the kids were they got evacuated multiple times, and the kids were really, the sands have been shifting, the ground's been shifting for them for over 12 months. And then they were at school, and then they were home from school, and then they were at school, and they're home from school during the COVID, because they're in regional Victoria. So they got let out early of lockdown, and then they went back, and it's been at least 12 months of really instability in their lives, and by no choice. Like, nobody was like, yeah, I think I'd like a really tumultuous 12 months. Like, if you choose variety and you decide, I'm going to sell my house, I'm going to buy a big van, I'm going to drive around Australia for a year, then sure, that's your choice. But when it's not by choice and it's sort of happening and you've got to adapt to it, it's a completely different emotional experience.
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually, we have someone writing in the launched magazine for WB40, which I'm thrilled and proud that you're a part of, Lisa, as well. But Callista Cooper has written this amazing article. She was in Mallacoota when those iconic fires really hit, and so this article is really lovely. It's it's 12 months on, and I highly recommend everybody read that if they get a chance. It's quite a lovely story, I guess, of yes, the trauma and what they went through, but also a story of hope coming out the other side of that. And they're by no means out of the woods in terms of Mallacoota. There's still a lot of people who are still needing to rebuild homes, etc. But I wanted to talk to you really about how you ended up coming into this mental health space, because for over a decade you were you're an ambulance driver.
Yes, yeah.
Paramedic. There you go.
Paramedic.
I'll get the word out in a minute.
That's okay. When we changed the vernacular changed from ambulance officer to paramedic, people were a little militant about it, like, don't call us ambulance officers. I don't think it really matters. You know what we do. We don't just drive, we also do the bit in the back, which is the life-saving stuff. So yeah, I did that just short of 11 years on the books.
Wow. And okay, so is that kind of what led you into the path that you are following now, which is, you are an author, but you're also a trainer, and you are also a trainer of NLP, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm just sort of more interested in what sort of then veered you into this path of being in the mental health sector.
I ended up in the mental health sector as a result of probably like the worst things that happened in my life. And I firmly believe that in each tragedy, certainly in my case, there's an opportunity. So about 8.5 years into my ambulance career, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. I'd sort of been up and down for about 18 months before that and holding it together. And for any emergency services workers listening, I know that you would agree you can't just not go to work because you don't feel like it. Like, that didn't seem like an option. I'm not, no disrespect to people that work in financial services, I love you. But I wasn't an accountant. I couldn't just phone it in for the day or work from home. When you're in that type of role, there is a self expectation, but also I think a reasonable expectation from community that you'll turn up and you'll be there in the most dire moments of someone's life, that when they call 000, someone turns up to help, or whatever your emergency number is. So it didn't feel like an option just to not go because I didn't want to. But that was taken out of my hands. So towards the end of 2013, I was basically what we call taken off road, which basically means like, I wasn't allowed to drive the ambulance or be in the back of the ambulance anymore. And I got told to take some time off, and I had to be signed off by a psychiatrist to prove that I was like safe for work. Stubborn since the day I was born breech, I refused to see a psychiatrist because I wasn't really interested in talking about what was going on with me. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it my way. And I did. I spent 4 months on the couch wallowing in self-pity and um, accepting my victim status that was given to me by the medical fraternity. So this is what you have now. You've just got to try and get your medication right and learn to live with it. And I tried that on for about 3 or 4 months and sat on the couch, watched a lot of Netflix. And I was 34 when I was put on a disability pension, which for anybody close to 34, like, that's not that old. I didn't really want to be a disability pensioner at 34. So I gave it a shot, and it took that long for me to sort of get sick of myself and realize that this wasn't for me. This is not an option. What other options do I have? And I started looking around and asking questions and speaking to people about um, just different sort of stuff. And then I caught wind of this. Someone said NLP, and I was like, well, what's that? And they said, blah, 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 blah. And I went, I don't even understand the words you said. And what they said was neuro-linguistic programming. I was like, great, I am none the wiser because you just said that. But they said that learning that had helped them learn about themselves. And I went, okay, cool. Well, I kind of got nothing to lose right now. I'm sitting on a pension and being disengaged as a partner and a parent, and was pretty unhappy with who I was. I'll give it a shot. So went about finding a school that I could learn that thing at. Do you teach NLP? Yes, that's the thing. I was like, yeah, I think so. And that was really the beginning of the tipping point. And I spent 18 months unpacking my diagnoses, learning about myself through deep reflection, getting different perspectives on my world, and ultimately learning that things are not as concrete as I thought they were. And ultimately being more comfortable with the idea that I'm in charge of my life. Because at the time I felt very at the whim of the universe, like a leaf floating in a breeze. I was like, well, these things keep happening to me, and this is what they tell me I have, and now I have to do this. And I really didn't feel at all in control over what was going on. I was reacting to my life rather than being an active participant. And what studying coaching and NLP and behavioral profiling and team building and all sorts of whatever I'd started being like a sponge. I was like sucking up everything I could and teach me that, and I want to learn that. And at the time I actually did every course that was offered by that particular educational facility. I was like, what else can I do? That's why I took 18 months, because I just did more and more and more, because I really realized I've got a hunger for learning and a crazy obsession with growth, like beyond a passion. If I'm not growing or changing in some way, I just get really stagnant and sick of myself. And I'm like, all right, well, what's the next thing I can do? And I've got to learn something. So I'm currently learning 2 languages at once, because, of course you would. So yeah, it was really that 18 months of unpacking that made me realize it wasn't just the work in ambulance, not just the jobs that I went to that led me to the point of poor mental health. It was organizational stress. It was the fact that I had 2 sexual assault incidents prior to becoming a paramedic. And some of it was intergenerational. So there's a growing body of evidence around intergenerational trauma, usually around Indigenous communities. They're doing a lot of research in that. And all 4 of my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. So for me, there's definitely a genetic element to a predisposition to things like PTSD. I am pretty confident that 2 of my grandparents did have it, but were never, was not talked about. It wasn't diagnosed. I think my grandfather might have been diagnosed with, shell shock, or one of those old terms that we essentially had for the same thing. So between the intergenerational stuff, sexual assaults, going into a emergency service, seeing the things I saw, the work culture, which was, if you're reading any local news here, it's reasonably toxic environment. All of that really compounded to get me to the point where I was unwell. So it wasn't really one thing at all. It was just such a collection of things over a long period of time. But I didn't know that until I started pulling it all apart.
And I think that's probably a truism for a lot of people. I would hazard to guess that anybody who's at my age, and obviously I'm 51, will have had at least one incident in their life that has caused trauma, or has caused anxiety, or has caused depression. And I think that for those people going around going, oh no, but I was depressed once, but I'm fine. I do have this kind of belief that if we don't deal with things in our life, that they just keep repeating themselves in different ways, or at least, they can be triggered in different ways. So what are your thoughts on that?
With all the study that I did, I've become a convert to the line of thinking that sort of aligns with ultimately what happens in your childhood experience is particularly key to how you develop into the adult that you develop into. There's a lot of research done around childhood adverse childhood events. So that there was an ACEs study, which was a longitudinal study, which I'm pretty sure was over sort of 20 years or more. They tracked people. They also have done, looking at what did you experience growing up. There's an incredible lady in the US. I'm going to get her name wrong. I think it's Fritz Horseman or something like that. Fritz something. Anyway, she runs programs in prisons in the United States around recognizing that prisoners will have similar traumatic histories. So even if they're in different gangs within the prison and they think of themselves as adversaries of the others, she runs this program. There's a documentary, if you want to chase it up, there's a documentary, it's a short film called Step Into the Circle or Step Inside the Circle. And she takes them through a process where she will stand in the center with a loudspeaker and she reads out statements like, one or both of your parents had a drug issue. And if that's true for you, they step into the circle. One or both of your parents had an issue with alcoholism, step into the circle. One or both of your parents physically disciplined you, step into the circle. And so she goes through and she just reads statement after statement. And what ends up happening is the circle really ends up closing in. And these really tough, hard men understand that they have way more similarities than they do differences. And then they have a discussion afterwards about these things that affected them as a kid, because ultimately we all want the same things as human beings, and you want them as a child and you want them as an adult, and that's security or safety, and you want to know that you're loved and that you're lovable. And that's pretty much fundamentally what we come down to. The one issue that people see me as a coach that I think anecdotally, and I haven't done a study, but anecdotally 9 out of 10 people will come to me with an issue that boils down to, I'm not enough. Now, you can have another word in there. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not skinny enough. I'm not tall enough, right? But ultimately, as human beings, we've kind of got this built-in programming of I'm not enough. And if you've had a childhood experience that affirmed that in any way, that significantly impacts the sort of behaviors and choices that you make as an adult and for the rest of your life. So I would completely agree with you in that if you don't allocate some time to sorting your stuff out, it will come up and bite you on the bum whether you like it or not.
Oh, look, I 100% I agree with that. I do. And I think it's true for all of us. So I think what's really fascinating listening to you say that most people come to you and they will say, I'm not enough, whatever
They
that.
don't know. They don't come and say that, but we
You know, in the end, that's what it's.
we dig down, and
Yep.
I think that's a common thread in humanity.
Oh yeah, but I
A lot
think
of
too
us are carrying that around.
in talking with so many women as I do, and getting to collaborate with so many women, and of building a community of women over the past 7 to 8 years, firstly through the blog and then through the podcast and everything else. It's quite fascinating to me that so many women that I see in the private groups or in the big women in business groups, or through comments they make via the blog, and now when people reach out, is that kind of underlying thing a lot with women, that we're not enough, that we're not, either we're not enough or we're too much, which is kind of it's a
Well,
weird
that's
thing,
too much is not quite enough, isn't it?
right? That's what it is. So if some women go, oh, I always feel like I'm too much, I'm too loud, I'm too opinionated, I'm too, or I'm just not enough. And,
Yeah.
and I find it kind of it's a global, that's an epidemic in itself. It's this kind of the insecurities of humanity and the things that we carry.
Well, that comes back to, the name of your podcast, The Good Girl Confessional. It's that good girl story that has, that talk about what's passed down through us in DNA. I mean, that's archaic. That, women being subservient, seen and not heard, stay home, raise the kids. That is multiple generations of story that we've been given by our mothers and our grandmothers, and none of this is intentional, but it's no surprise at all that we all sort of get around with this kind of like really deep idea that somewhere in there, I'm just not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm not being the good girl, and that rebellion. So when there is an influence like that or a belief like that in your life, you'll either take it on board and accept it as truth, and you will find evidence to enforce that, right? So I wasn't enough for my first husband, and I wasn't enough for my second husband, and so they find evidence to reinforce this not enoughness, or they'll really push back against it, and the pendulum swings the other way, and that's, well, screw you, I'm going to be too much then, I'm not going to be quiet enough, and it's a rebellion response, which I've got to say I'm probably inclined to that one, which is right. Well,
Probably me too.
if you say so. Yeah, there's nothing I like more than a challenge or someone telling me I can't do something.
I don't think the same. I am a bit of a rebel in that way. But
Yeah, it's that rebel archetype. But we're all trying on some deep subconscious level to be accepted and to be loved, and we think that if our DNA structure is telling us to be loved and to be safe and looked after, then you need to be quiet and you need to be demure and you can't say fuck and all this other stuff that makes you a
yeah,
good girl.
yeah, exactly right.
Um,
Don't have too many opinions, or if you do, don't bring them to the table.
that's
Right?
right. Keep them to yourself.
Mm.
And I mean, we look at even current corporate culture. Um, I'm sure I have an intergenerational trigger of being talked over. Because it fires up something in me that is older than I am. Right? There's something in me that is older than 40 years old that goes, don't fucking talk over me. Like I find it induces this response that's really like extreme in, it's probably outweighs what's required. But I think that comes from somewhere deep of generations of women being talked over, and I think that's why we all collectively cheered, when Kamala Harris did the I'm speaking, and all women across the world were like, shit, yeah, lady. Like we've all wanted to say that at some point and say, you know what? My speaking is just as valid as yours. So if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. And that the fact that we have, ovaries, just because someone has ovaries doesn't make us somehow less valid in this world.
It's obviously an improved model, Sandy. All right. Have you ever watched a man get kicked in the nuts?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So whoever was creating, right, whether you believe in God or not, someone went, that's a flawed system. What about we tuck that all up inside where it's heaps safer? We're human version 2.0. We're remodeled for, we're the better version. So I don't know about this inadequacy complex we're all getting around with.
Yeah. I just love that about, was it Betty White that said,
Yes.
that, we have a vagina. So
Yeah, you shouldn't, what was it? You shouldn't call people pussy as an insult because a pussy really knows how to take a beating or something.
beating, that's right.
Fantastic.
Which is true, right?
I love that woman. Look, particularly, and I think that's maybe as I'm getting older, really stepping into that crone, I don't, whatever you're comfortable, what term you're comfortable, but it's sort of the older mother that's like, you know what? I've pushed some babies out of my privates, and after that, it changes it's that for me, changed my belief about myself. And I've really settled into that in the last decade. My son's 9 and a bit. And it's sort of taken that long for me to go, you know what? Like, I'm made a person. So
I do
you're,
think there is.
your minuscule shit that, you did awesome, great. Yep, I grew a human. So shut up.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. But I do think for women, whether we have had children or we haven't had children, or we're parenting other people or whatever is happening, the reality is that I do think there is a thing that happens with women. I remember my mum saying this to me, you will start to understand who you are when you hit 40 and beyond. And so for me, starting this magazine, and this platform for women 40 and over, and I'm obviously in my 50s, so it's beyond 40, it's beyond 50, it's beyond 60, the reality is I think we do grow into ourselves, and that I now realize that what she was speaking was the truth. And there is this kind of hard-won wisdom that we learn from our mothers or our grandmothers. And while they pass down, as you say, this kind of genetic information that we're all meant to be good and quiet, there are pearls of wisdom as well that come through. So,
it must have an expiry date. Because we reach a point where, like, you know what? Like, my mantra at the moment is just like all out of fucks. Yeah. Like, that is my mantra. I've got a t-shirt and I'm just, you know what? Just, I don't care anymore. I honestly don't care about, I have a small circle. I have a very small circle. I would say less than 10 people whose opinions are very valuable to me. And if they came and said, Lisa, you might want to reconsider this, I'd take that on board and I'd reflect on it. But, trolls on the internet, or someone drops into your DMs, or, all these people that seem to have an opinion, and social media has created a situation where everyone's opinion is apparently equally valid, which it's really not. Outside of my sort of small circle, I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
And that's such a relief.
And it's kind of a really strong sort of position to come from, because there's so many people out there who are really impacted on a daily basis by the thoughts of others, and especially, but not limited to, but especially younger people. And we know that. And I always think the internet can be an actual place of amazingness when it brings communities together. And I think about my friends in the disability sector, for example, who without the internet wouldn't have communities of people who understand what they're going through, that they're not people they may have met going down to their local shop or whatever, for example, but they've met them online. So it can be this kind of really great place. I remember Tara Moss was recently here in the Confessional saying exactly that. But she, like a lot of other people and who have kind of any online presence, has been trolled and has been on the tail end of that as well. So it's kind of a place of good and a place of not good. But really, it's about having enough resilience in ourselves, as you say, Lisa, to get to a place of, I know what the opinions that actually do matter to me in my life, and they're not the people out there whom I've never met.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, the internet is an extension of humanity.
It
It
really
was
is,
it was
yeah.
created by us, and so it highlights the good and the bad. And so the sense of I've seen some incredible community projects be put together online, from people all over the world that have never met. A few of those, they get together and play a song. There'd be those music videos, and someone's in Mexico and someone's in Peru and someone's in Sweden, and that probably would never have occurred without that technology to actually get physically all in one place. So it shows us the best of humanity and also the worst, and it just amplifies it on a screen, which we're all always looking at. Yeah, I've recommended that to a lot of a lot of clients, is to make your circle smaller. The people that matter, really write a list, honestly, and if they're not on the list, they don't count. Because as you say, I've got kids 19 and 21 tomorrow.
Oh,
Um,
happy birthday.
and happy birthday, Savannah, if she listens. Um, and I've seen the potential for negativity and that influence online, and how it affects young people that are still developing. Like, honestly, our brains are not even developed by 25. Even though you think you're very grown up well before then. Um,
And don't you know it? Don't you know
that's right. Yes, and we'll let you know that as well.
it?
Okay, now you can stop listening, so. Um, no, and I say that with love. But I think what's also challenging for our generation as parents or carers, or working with young people, is we really didn't experience that growing up. I mean, if there was a schoolyard bully, there'd be a bit of back and forth behind your back, and then at some point someone had hit somebody else and it'll be over. But we didn't grow up with this potential for um, anonymous bullying online, or comparison, apples and oranges comparison. People looking at Instagram profiles of pseudo famous influencers, and I'll get the vernacular wrong because I'm old. But these people with millions of followers for getting around in their bikini, and they compare their life in suburban wherever you are to that, and they're like, oh, I'm not achieving, or I'm not as pretty as her. And like, it's apples and oranges. And I think it can be an issue with online business as well, or business people online, is they'll look at the public social media profile of another business person, perhaps in the same MLM or in the same field of business, and be like, I'm not doing as well as that person. And my advice has been to them, how does your Facebook life compare to their Facebook life? That's an apples and apples comparison, not you comparing your whole life, warts and all, dropping the kid off at 9:05 in your dressing gown, right? The reality versus their Facebook life,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's an unfair comparison. That's apples and oranges. And if you don't know what's going on for them behind the scenes, don't torture yourself and assume that, we all know, like, spoiler alert, that what we put out on social media is not the whole story, right? So why do we assume that when we look at somebody else's social media that they're somehow being really genuine and giving us a glimpse into their whole world? Like, it's obviously not. People used to say, oh, I love all the salads and stuff that you post. I went through a bit of a cooking phase a couple of years ago. And they're like, oh, you eat so healthy. And I was like, I don't put fish and chip night on Facebook. Like, I've done a drive-through Macca's Uber Eats tonight because I can't be asked. Like, I don't put that on social media, but I'm like, check out this salad I made from scratch, right? Like,
I compare that. I always say to my kids, it's a little bit like when we were growing up, way before all of this was going on. We were taking photographs on our, camera, and then you took your roll of film and you took it and you got it developed in your roll of film, which I know this is how old I am.
And you had to
And
wait. You had to wait.
you had to wait. First of all, you had to wait. Second of all, you're looking through this tiny little viewfinder. It's not like digital photography. You don't take 27 photos and get one really good
Yes.
photo. Back in our day, it was like you got a snapshot of a moment in time. And this is what I always remind my kids and people around me who, if they're ever upset about social media, seeing someone's Instagram post is a moment in time. And for me, like, I'm sure people often think, Lisa, I'm an alcoholic because I do have a lot of photos of cocktails on my, but if I lived on a staple diet of cocktails, I wouldn't get anything done, right? But it's a moment, and I do like cocktails, but it's a moment in time. And as you say, you're not going to put up, and this is why I liken it to photographs back in the day. If I took a really great photograph or, whatever, I might put that in a frame because it was like, wow, that was such a great day or a great moment or whatever. You're not going to find the crappiest photograph that you took in that roll of film and go, yeah, I'm going to show everybody that photo because it's crap. I mean, that's what I mean. It's a moment in time.
Yeah.
And we show the happy moments because they're the ones we want to celebrate more so than the sad moments or the traumatic moments or the whatever. It's difficult to share those experiences because those are not the things we usually celebrate. And I think that's you've got just people put it in perspective and go, yes, of course that person's showing you all the good things because they're not going to show you the tough stuff, the hard stuff, the whatever.
Yeah, which is an interesting juxtaposition because we are programmed to look for the negative. We're programmed to look for the things that aren't working or the problems or, and that goes back to, caveman threat analysis. Like, is it safe to go outside or will I be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, right? So we are deeply programmed to look for threat and risk. So we tend to focus on the negatives, the things that aren't working, the things that don't happen. But then when it comes to social media, we want to show the exact opposite, which is by definition then a minority of your life experience.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's all it is. I liken it to a photo album because that's really all it is. For those of us who are running small businesses online and through socials, I have shown, I've been on video with no makeup and just said this is how it is, and especially during COVID. And I think that was really important. And certainly not, I think a lot of people started doing it, but I don't think that was necessarily a well thought out plan. We were living in those moments, and that was our everyday snapshot and our everyday moments, and kind of sharing it maybe made people feel like they knew you better or that they were able to come together as a community for your business or within your business or whatever that is. So for me, it was really important to reach out and kind of say to this amazing community of women that we're building that, is everyone okay? How are you doing? And I think that that's okay. And I kind of like that has been a bit of a trend since, that people are kind of getting on there and going, it wasn't a great day today. This is why. But anywho, you know what I mean? Like, we're not all, there's still snapshots in time. And I think that, showing perhaps the more human side of everything is important as well. I can understand, and I really do understand why people, though, don't put up every sad photo in their life of what is happening, because I think sometimes that's not what sometimes you don't want to share that with people. Sometimes that's such an internal thing that goes on when you're sad, or when you've lost someone, or you're going through trauma, or you're getting a divorce, whatever it may be. That's not something, sometimes you want to analyze it yourself before you're sharing that out there with the world anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's leadership, to be able to come out and show your whole humanness to the world, whether it's the whole world or your community. I think that's leadership. It's somebody told me once, never trust anybody who tells you they're authentic. I was like,
And it's unfortunate that authentic has become like a buzzword, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to
Whereas exactly what you've described as being authentic is going, hey, I'm a whole person and not all of it's pretty, and I don't always have my hair done.
I often don't.
An expression, what's not said in doing those things is I'm okay with myself, and I invite you to be okay with yourself.
Oh, that's a
And
really
I
nice way to put
think
it. Yeah.
that's where the power lies. You know, when you can put something out and do a video with no makeup and go, well, this is how it is today. To misquote Marianne Williamson, you know, shining our own light gives others permission to shine theirs.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and I have seen more of that. I think also this year, you know, unless you disappeared off social media in your business for a year because you're like, oh, you know, but I'm not traveling on a plane and I'm not flying to so and so, and oh, I'm spending my day in my living room trying to homeschool my kid bloody grade 3 maths, right? You know, either you check out for the year because you got nothing pretty, or you adapt and you go, well, this is my day, and I put my books in the bookshelf on rainbow order in, you know, rainbow colors, and that's been my achievement for today. And I think the scale of our projected lives shrank a little bit, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing.
Look, I don't think so either. And I do think, and as I said, I never planned myself, as I'm sure you did, and a lot of people didn't, to put up videos of myself with my greasy hair and my whatever, and just kind of go, you know, it's a little bit crap. Let's like kid ourselves. Right now, it was a little bit crap, but I think, as you say, it's kind of really nice because it did allow people to kind of go, yeah, I am having a bit of a hard time, or you're right, this is a bit crap, or I'm glad you said that because I felt like that as well, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, you know, look, as much as I threw my hat in the ring and I gave it a go to make some sourdough bread, you know, like there's only so much bread I could make, and there's only, you know.
I didn't even try. First lockdown, I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube.
Well done.
And thank you. And second lockdown, I started learning German.
Did you get very far with the German?
Yeah, I'm still doing it.
Oh, well done.
Actually, to be fair, I started earlier, but then I really picked it up.
Well done.
Yeah, I didn't give the sourdough a go.
I reupholstered an ottoman.
What's that?
I reupholstered an ottoman.
That's impressive.
Listen, it was pretty.
I started paint.
Chuffed.
I did paint by numbers.
Oh, yeah. My daughters did a lot of paint by numbers and diamond painting. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, you stick on the thing.
Yeah, you stick on the little diamonds.
Yeah, I still haven't finished my paint by numbers because lockdown ended. I've got shit to do. It'll come back.
Don't worry. There will be time again. But yeah, no, that's true. I really like went to town and decided I was going to recover this ottoman, which looked amazing when I finished. But let me tell you, I have no desire to ever do that again.
It's not a thing.
No, not on my list.
And it wasn't, you know, my year wasn't all puppies and sunshine. And I think it's really important to point out that even when you're in the field of mental health, you're not immune to poor mental health. You know, my information, my knowledge, my insight, my awareness doesn't make me superhuman. I don't, you know, it doesn't mean I never feel shit. I definitely had a big dip. Melbourne winter usually knocks me for 6 anyway. But this year in particular, given that we were isolated, I couldn't go and see my parents. You know, pretty much July, probably halfway through June and until halfway through August, you know, it was probably 8 weeks of horrible. I didn't want to get out of bed. Wasn't eating properly, you know, just really low. And I've had a good few number of low points in my life.
I think that's a really impressive and important point that you make, that even when you have all the tools and you're more aware of it, it doesn't mean that you won't feel those things. It probably means that you're aware of what is going on quicker, maybe, but it doesn't mean you won't feel sad or whatever. And I think, you know, it's interesting. Someone said to me during COVID, "You're the most optimistic person I know and you sound really flat." And I was like, well, this is a hell of a year. I was flat. I was really flat. And I remember, you know, I feel like, you know, all the COVID things, I have eaten badly. I probably drunk too much. I couldn't see my sons for months and months and months. That was a bit of a killer for me
Mm.
as a mum and in a kind of close-knit family with my kids. That was really, it was difficult. So I think it's, it is important to kind of be able to say that as well, that we all feel it at times, regardless of what is going on in our life. I think none of us are superhuman. We're not.
Yeah, I think to imagine that just because you've got a good mental health toolkit, I'm pretty sure there's people that work at, Lifeline and Beyond Blue that had to call their own respective service potentially. Um, no one's immune. Nobody owns poor mental health. Nobody owns any particular diagnosis. So, PTSD is not uniform specific. Anybody can have it. It's if you think of mental well-being as a continuum from poor mental health to great mental health, or as I call it, rock bottom to rocking, we all slide up and down that continuum every day. Sometimes you get out of bed and you're like, I'm really not optimistic about today. Like, I didn't get enough sleep and I feel like shit. And then by the afternoon, you're like, today was the best day ever, right? And we slide, it can happen within a day, it can happen within hours, within a week. We're always somewhere along that continuum. And that's just being a human. That's part of, like, you've got to eat, you've got to drink, you've got to shit. Like, that's part of the deal of being a person, is that you're going to be somewhere along this continuum. Otherwise you're a robot or dead, right? So I think if we consider mental well-being, mental health, mental wellness in that framework, in that paradigm of a continuum, that some days you're at the lower end and some days you're at the higher end, and ideally we don't want people to stay down the low shitty end for too long, but geez, we all visit. Then there doesn't need to be any stigma. That's like creating a stigma around you know oh, do you have to drink water? Do you? Oh, right. Well, I've never had an issue with water. I've never had it in my life. Like, what? That's a ridiculous.
Yeah.
Of course, as a person, you need to eat, you need to drink. And as a person, you will have low points and you'll have high points. And that's all part of the human experience. So I don't really get why there's a stigma for any particular point on that
On the
continuum,
scale. Yeah.
because
I think it's really nice at the moment. Well, not nice. It's never nice when people are going through, difficult times. It's not nice when people are going through mental, you know, issues. But the reality is, what is nice is that there has been a shift in the media, in society, about starting to shine a spotlight on mental health and mental well-being. And I do believe, yet again, so for all the negative that came out of 2020, one of the positives that has come out of this around the world is that it's a global pandemic, meaning that people around the whole world started to face challenges, some of which they hadn't faced before. And a lot of those challenges were around isolation, feelings of sadness, feelings of, so mental health, there was a huge light shone on it. And I think that that's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a really positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, nothing has ever suffered from more conversation about it. I think my hope is, and I'm probably naturally a tendency for optimism like yourself. I've trained myself to look for the silver linings and filter things through a gratitude mindset. So I sort of cultivated a gratitude filter as part of my recovery. And it's one of the things that I teach in one of my programs is you will find what you're looking for, right? So there's a part of your subconscious brain, to get technical, called your reticular activating system. And ultimately, it's this idea of, what you focus on grows. We've got those lots of little catchy, tropes about it. But ultimately, you'll find what you're looking for, because your subconscious drive is for you to be correct. So, when you walk out of the shoe shop and you've got your bag, and then you're looking at everyone's shoes. You're like, oh, I should have got those, right? Or you're thinking about buying a red Volkswagen Golf, and then all of a sudden they're freaking everywhere, right? Because your brain is designed to help you see what it is you're looking for. Oh, like that one? Oh, like that one? Oh, no, my own. Oh, okay, cool, right? So when you are programmed to look for failure, for things going wrong, for disaster, you'll keep seeing that. And conversely, if you look for the silver lining or the opportunity for growth or the learning, that's what you'll start seeing, because it's all out there. Our vision is typically very focal, very narrow vision. And we really only see what we have programmed ourselves to look for. And I think one of the great things that's happened globally is a greater acceptance of the variation in human experience. And I'm optimistic that that means we've rediscovered elements of our humanity that perhaps we've stigmatized or demonized over the last little while. And now that so many have gone through this experience on one level or another, that we'll all recognize that we have more in common than we do different. And our human experience of wanting to be safe and wanting to be loved and needing food and drink and poop, right? And all that stuff that we do as a human, and we slide up and down this continuum. We're all doing the same thing, you know, and I'm hoping that that carries through, that carries into the years that follow. And I think depending on your circles in terms of social media, who you follow, what groups you're in, as much as there is a lot of division and a lot of black and white thinking coming from parts of the world, and has been for, let's say, 4 years, there is also a big movement of the other side of the pendulum. You know, we live in a dichotomous world. If there's black, there's white. I mean, the truth of it is most of us are living in the gray. But the flip side of this divisive culture that we've seen televised is a real sense of strengthening of community in a global way. I've been, you know, there's been multiple, you know, online summits of wellness and driving community, and people realizing that we don't need gadgets, we don't need stuff. What we actually really need, and what we missed the most, was each other.
Yeah, humanity and connection, right?
It's one of our key driving forces. Human beings are not supposed to do life alone.
Oh, great. I had Dr. Catherine Barrett came on this podcast very early on. He started the kindness pandemic at the beginning of this pandemic, which then became a global movement. She's an Aussie woman. She's amazing. But was that because in what she understood as well was that this sense of connection and kindness, but also how in doing small acts of kindness for someone else actually improves our own mental health. Makes us feel like we are part of something bigger, makes us feel like we are doing good in the world. And so although it brings joy to the person you're doing those small acts of kindness for, it also makes us feel better as human beings, because as you say, we're actually not meant to be going it alone in this world. And I think for a long time, we've been disconnected from community. You know, interestingly, prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID, I didn't actually know my neighbours. And in more recent times, since everything has opened up, I have gotten to know my neighbours, and I'm going to credit them with that, because, you know, I got a knock on the door one day, and I knew them enough to say, hi, how you doing, and whatever. That one of them knocked on my door and said, hey, some of the girls in the neighbourhood are coming over. Do you want to come over for some bubbles? This kind of, you know, what seemed so small to her was so huge to me, because I went over there and I actually met women in my neighborhood that I had never met before. I mean, that's huge, right?
That's beautiful.
Back in the day, everyone would have been doing that, but we're all so busy, and I've always been at work and rushing around and juggling kids and a career and stuff and whatever. That, that humanity, that kind of sense of community has been so lost along the way. So you're 100% right, Gillian.
Yeah. I was saying for a few years ago, we've I know for me, my self-worth is very much tied to tasks and achievement and getting things done, whatever that means. Um, and I don't know whether that was, passed down or if I made it up myself, but I know when I analyze it that I feel better in myself about being worthy of rest, worthy of taking a day off,
Yeah.
is directly tied to usually really extreme expectations of achievement. So when I've done this list of 25 things, then I can have a sit down, and we get so caught up in being a human doing rather than a human being. And I think what lockdowns and these sorts of things have really forced upon us is to pare some of that back and go, well, you can't go out to your casual job. You can't run around and, busy yourself at the shopping centres, every weekend or whatever, getting some bits and bobs and some things I need for the house and, just that random shit, right? You can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I tried to utilize the time with varying levels of success, I might add, to remind myself it's okay to be a human being. And some days, I do better at that. And some days I still, self-flagellate and you didn't get enough done and the bloody dishes and the laundry and the kid and, sure.
Yeah, all the stuff.
All the stuff.
All the stuff. There's so much of it. I think you're right. I've learned. I'm actually, I'm probably still learning. But you're right. Through COVID, I've done this whole look. I have to work from home or whatever. I couldn't go out everywhere. Couldn't do all the things. And at first, this was, was really difficult for me because I've always been so busy and I've always jammed so much into my life. And I'm actually, I've come full circle to the point now where I'm actually really enjoying not having 40 things shoved into every weekend, not having to do something every single night, not having so much on that I can't breathe, and I think
I can't think,
right? I can't think, and that's okay, because as you say, because then it gives us permission to then go, oh, I'm going to fall into bed and go to sleep early tonight. But I'm actually enjoying just having time, to watch Netflix or to read a book or to listen to an audiobook or to listen to a podcast or whatever it may be. Yeah. And it's given me a whole lot of extra time, interestingly enough, that my, creativity has gone sort of through the roof, where I'm thinking about things I want to do and kind of looking at the stuff I really love, which is the magazine and the podcast and the things. But it's really kind of allowed me to center myself and not be so crazy busy all the time.
Yeah, I realized at the start of the first lockdown, so for us in Melbourne, that was sort of late March, early April, and I sort of got a couple of weeks into that and couldn't do my casual job anymore. And I I was so restless. I had such awful, almost a nervous energy, but it was just extra energy. And I realized that I had become addicted to being busy, and I was so busy, not productive, let's be clear, busy, rushing from one thing to the next, because again, like you, I work from home. My child is primary school age, my youngest. So, my normal day pre-COVID is, school drop off, appointment, meeting, errand, and try and get in as much as I can before 3 o'clock, because then you got to do pickup, and I would feel that and literally go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. So that's either a meeting or a call or an errand. I've got to pick that up for the dog, and I would feel that sort of 6 hours while he was at school. And when he was home in the first, okay, you're going to homeschool, it was physically uncomfortable not racing around, because that had become my normal state. And I noticed that I was finding things to fill in to justify the sense of busyness within me, when I didn't have the external tasks to legitimize being busy. So I was, cleaning out pantries, and, you did all that sort of like, I'm going to fold up all the plastic shopping bags, right? Right. Because it was so uncomfortable, and it was confronting to let the busyness go, because again, my worth is tied to that busyness. My worth is tied to filling those 6 hours with meetings and errands and running around. And, my mum would always say to me, why do you always ring me when you're in the car? And I'm like, because I'm always in the car. Like, because I'm always doing something or going somewhere or being a thing, and I think for a long time, a lot of us have worn busy as a badge of pride, a badge of honor. I'm very busy, but busy is not the same as productive. Busy is not the same as healthy. Busy is not really something to aspire to. And I think for a lot of us, that was brought sharply into focus this year, when kind of a lot of our busy got taken away. And you could see organizations do it. There people are like, oh my God, I've been back-to-back Zoom meetings for 4 hours. It's like, but why? Did it have to be a Zoom meeting? Could it have been an email chain? But there was also a sense from employers that they have to keep their employees busy, because that's what they would normally be doing. And I think by the end, particularly with Melbourne, I think I read someone was like 111 days in lockdown. They finally got to a point where it was like, you know what? People are doing their work. Just let them be. They know what they're doing. We learnt to trust them. And I'm hoping that that's one of the things that carries on, is that this idea of working from home, or, women in particular juggling motherhood and work life, that employers will be a little more flexible and go, well, you did it for a whole year, and the sky didn't fall in, so yeah, you can work from home 3 days a week, as long as you keep doing your stuff, and that'll carry over hopefully into 21 and 22, and that acceptance that there are other ways to do things, and they're actually a lot better for people, which means that they're a lot better for the organization, whether you're self-employed or you work for somebody else.
Absolutely. I think that, and people are starting to feel, look, certainly I've seen a lot of people work themselves into the ground, even through COVID, even though they were working remotely or working from home.
Yeah.
But I do think there is now this sense of, we can breathe now. Our workplace recognizes that we are productive. We recognize in ourselves that we are productive, and we can just sort of, relax a bit more now and get into it and just find a groove. It is unlikely that, Melbourne or Australia or the world is going to go back to the way things were 100%. I mean, not for a long time yet anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see offices full of cubicles and people working shoulder to shoulder for quite a while,
No,
which,
I agree.
I think is probably a good thing.
I think it's good. Hey, I wanted to chat with you though about, so you have a new program coming up. You have a new course coming up, and I wanted to chat with you about that, and wondered if you wanted to have a chat about, you've touched on NLP, but really what is it, and why are you teaching it, and what can people get out of it?
All excellent questions. Yeah, what is NLP is a good place to start. The technical answer is that NLP was sort of born out of the positive psychology movement in the late 60s. So it's been around for a long time. two guys in the States. Essentially, if you think of Freudian psychology as what's the problem? Let's find the origin of the problem, lay down on the couch and tell me about your mother, and that real historical look, which, as we've talked about, has value, but that's kind of not the end of the story. And what positive psychology looks at is more looking forward. And so NLP, primarily one of the biggest principles is what we call modeling. And that's basically looking at, well, what areas of your life are going well? Because it's rare for, somebody to have all areas of their life are a complete disaster, right? So typically you'll be like, well, my relationship at home is good, but work's not going so well. Or I'm doing awesome at work, but my wife won't talk to me, So there'll be an area, or my health is not great. Or I'm not, because I'm doing really well at work, I'm putting in extra hours, but now I've put on some weight and I'm not so healthy. Or so there'll be some element of your life that, not doing so great, but others that are working well. And so what we tend to focus on is, well, what's working well and what are you doing in that area? And how can we map those thoughts, actions, behaviors, habits, beliefs about the area that's you're going well into over to the area that's not great? And, if you were to believe this good thing about that part of your life, what would change about that part? Oh, well, in that case, I would be, So that's kind of the concept of modeling, is also who is doing well in the area that you want to excel in. So if you want to do, and this is sort of where mentoring comes from, is that you will look at somebody who is a few steps ahead on a similar path and go, well, they're doing really great. And if you get a mentor, and lots of people have them, particularly self-owned, businesses, you get a mentor, don't just ask them about what CRM or, email software they use, right? It's not about acuity scheduling or any, it's not about that. What you want to ask a mentor and model from them is, what do they believe about their own abilities in their business? What is true for them about their success, right? And what you want to model when you have a mentor, or even if you stalk them online, right, is, what do they believe about themselves? What do they say to themselves when they get up in the morning? How do they manage conflict? How do they achieve through challenge? How do they grow through challenge? It's those aspects of that person that you can then model in your own life, in your own business, in this case. So NLP, in my language, is a framework for change. So I sort of think of it like a skeleton, that I will teach you the anatomy of the skeleton, and then whatever you bring into the room is the flesh you're going to hang on the bones. Because everybody gets something different out of it, which is kind of, it's tricky to sell, because you're going to get out of it what you want out of it. So it's very individualized. So I came to NLP diagnosed with a bunch of mental illnesses, diagnosed with fibromyalgia, very much in the I can't headspace. I can't exercise because then I have to sleep for 3 days, and I can't work because of this, and I can't. I had a lot of really great sentences, and those were my beliefs about myself and my abilities. And looking at a different perspective, looking at the world through a different lens of, but what if you could? I remember going into my first ever class, and I was like, arms folded, frowny face, right, in pain all through my body, and very much had the, you don't know my life, you don't know what I've been through. I was equally balanced. I had chips on both shoulders, and I sat there with my arms folded, like, oh yeah, what's this going to be like? And I was talking about where I was at. Where are you at in life? Well, I'm sick of being angry and I'm sick of being in pain. I don't want to yell at my kids for no reason anymore. And I don't want to be exhausted. And I reeled off a whole lot of stuff that I was very familiar with because I'd been saying this over and over for months. What was the phrase? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? We've all heard that one. And that was what I was living. And the trainer at the front of the room said to me, okay, I've got a very clear idea of what you don't want. What do you want instead?
Oh.
And I went, oh, I don't know. And I realized in that moment that I had put all of my energy into what I didn't want. And so, of course, we talked about before, what you focus on, you get, right? So I was getting a whole lot over and over of what I didn't want because that's where I was looking. And to pivot my focus to, well, what do you do want instead? Oh, shit. I haven't thought about that. I suppose I want to be happy. What does that mean? I don't know. I want to be energetic. Okay, great. Energetic. Okay, cool. And I started creating a vision for what I wanted. And then through the learnings of NLP and the reflections, I mean, you can go into an NLP training and you can learn it as a toolkit to use for other people. Like, okay, well, that'd be really useful to help someone else. Or you can do what I did and allow it to be incredibly transformational and run everything through you. Learn it, integrate it, do it. And then if you do want to move forward and be a coach or a practitioner, or maybe you're already doing something like Reiki or healing, you don't have to say you're authentic because you are authentic because you've done it yourself. And so you know what this process feels like from the client side so I've been in many, many trainings, both as a student and as a trainer. And there are two groups of people. There are the people that learn it as a toolkit. Isn't that nice? And there are people that allow themselves to have an immersive experience and realize, wow, this is all really relevant to me. And it's an opportunity to shift what I don't want and create what I do want. And those people progress much faster and much further because they have allowed themselves to have that experience. And that's ultimately the reason I ended up training it, is because I've been a trainer from way back, used to train first aid and CPR and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, my favorite moment, one of my favorite moments in life is taking a really complex idea or an abstract idea and turning it into something really easily digestible and watching somebody receive that, and that little bing as they go, oh my God, I've heard somebody say that 7 times and now it finally makes sense, right? That penny drop moment, that makes my heart sing. Like, that's the best thing in the world. I adore that. My dad has a teaching, he's a doctor, but he's also been involved in teaching for a long time. My brother is a driving instructor for like track stuff, like the high end stuff, not just like L platers. So we've all sort of moved into these teaching kind of roles and educator roles because we love that moment. We love that penny drop where they're like, oh, I get it. And so I was trying to think, well, what can I do? What can I teach that I am very passionate about? And then beyond my own practitioner training and master practitioner training in NLP, I went off and I did my trainer training because I could think of nothing more powerful and more impactful to spread ripples out into the world of, positivity and growth and empowerment than to teach people this framework for change. And also have a heap of fun doing it. So we don't get too serious.
But that's, yeah, I mean, look, and I imagine that is really helpful in terms of for people, as you say, going through really difficult times of trying to kind of, who can't figure out, well, why do I keep going through all these things? to people, as you say, business owners or people wanting to start something new in a project, but they feel blocked all the time or whatever, that these things will be really helpful moving forward. I imagine that it's stuff that you can use really in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, it's very much across the board. I mean, it changed my parenting. My little person visited before. It changed the way that both myself and my husband would speak to him. So simple things like telling people, and not just for kids, here's a life hack tip. Tell people what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. So, we would do the old like, stop wriggling around on your chair, and as soon as we changed to sit still and eat your dinner, oh, right, well, now I know what you want me to do,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So we respond better to being just given a clear direction rather than being told the negative. So which makes me suspicious at the supermarket, because they have signs up that says don't forget your bags in the car. And I reckon that they want you to forget your bags so you buy some more bags, right?
Well, there is a whole psychology in advertising, right? For exactly those reasons, that they actually do very deliberately feed us messages they hope will have the impact they are hoping for, not the ones that we want. So
Exactly. The
supermarkets
power of language can be used for good or for evil. It comes down to intention. And there is, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. The L is linguistic. This is language-based. So it's very much about language and breaking down language, which I think I fessed up before to learning 2 foreign languages at one time. So
Yes.
language has always been something I've been fascinated with. And so being able to pull it apart and highlight bits and say, when, that sign says that, they want you to forget your bags because you won't read the don't,
And then you'll buy more.
And you buy more bags, which is exactly. So it's a bit of a pull back the curtain for a lot of things like that as well. Doing your NLP, it gives you advanced communication and rapport building skills, which are, you can use that having a talk to your kid's school teacher or in a business proposal, with JVs. There's all sorts of places where it can be really helpful to have a really deliberate sort of advanced understanding of the words you're using and being a bit clever with them. And we always talk about using that knowledge with integrity and with the best of intention. So not, car salesman, manipulative type, typical car salesman. I'm sure if you're a car salesman, you're a lovely human being.
We will actually put up all of your links, by the way, below, but tell everyone where they can find all of the information if they want to join your next course, which is when?
We start on the 11th of January. It is in Dandenong, which is in Victoria. There's lots of accommodation nearby if you need to come and stay. We have a few people that are staying locally because they're coming from elsewhere. So it's an 8-day training. So it's the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, which is a Monday through Thursday. Then you can have 3 days off to go home and deal with 4 days of information. So you have the Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, return on the following Monday, which is the 18th, for another 4 days. That's the 18th, 19th, 20th and 21st. Again, the Monday through Thursday for 2 consecutive weeks. And then we usually have a big celebratory dinner on the final evening to celebrate our achievements and check out our certificates. And because it's such a beautiful bonding experience as well. So most groups tend to form some pretty strong friendships while they're in there. So the best way to find all the information is to head to lisawestgate.com. Just click at the top where it says NLP Training. That'll take you to the page that's got all the information, and you can click right there to secure your seat.
Fantastic. And I will say too, and I alluded to this earlier, but you have written for our debut issue of Women Beyond 40 magazine, and I'm extraordinarily thrilled, and told us quite raw honesty about experiences that have happened in your life that changed and altered your view of yourself and your life. And I thank you for that. I'm extraordinarily proud to have you as part of the WB40 team. So thank you.
Oh, congratulations on the launch of the magazine. It's
Woo-hoo.
very exciting.
Yeah,
I'm so
and
proud of
again,
you. And yeah, super grateful to be invited to contribute. It is a very raw article. I think we've got some TWs at the top there.
we
So
do
that
have some trigger warnings at the top. It is a very, very raw and honest, yes.
because I'm very authentic, Sandy. Yeah.
And
No,
all,
you
and
know,
all
because I told you. Yeah.
no, but you actually are. And you actually are. But, it is that beautiful raw honesty. I think that we do have trigger warnings at the front of your article, but people will, if they can read it, I encourage them to do so. I understand that some may not be able to, but it is really beautiful. And I thank you so much for that, because obviously our first edition is really all about the hard-won wisdom of women. And because it's never wisdom, our wisdom that we carry is never just handed to us on a silver platter. It is hard-won. And for us to be able to come through and share our voices and share our stories and encourage other women 40 and over to do the same thing is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about telling that story about that part of my life, because I think, as we were saying earlier, it gives permission for others to do the same. And you don't have to do it on stage like I do. You don't have to write a magazine article, but maybe you can tell a loved one or authorities or somebody close to you that of your experience having read mine. So that's why I'm happy to share that. And I thank you for that opportunity to
No, we
spread
thank
that.
you for coming on board and for sharing that with so many people. So thank you. I encourage everyone, if you've loved what you've heard today from Lisa, who's an extraordinary human, jump on to lisawestgate.com, as she said, and check out her NLP training. Which starts on the 11th of January. Which is fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisa. From the bottom of my heart, I feel like, you're an incredibly generous human, giving up your time again today. Really appreciate it. And as always, so great to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right. Thank you and goodbye. Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine, available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.